We are also awaiting this, a possible Trump indictment in relation to the 2020 election, the events that took place on January 6th. And we're learning through sources this could come down at any moment.
If you recall, the former president, Donald Trump, writing on Truth Social, he said, "I assume that an indictment from deranged Jack Smith and his highly partisan gang of thugs pertaining to my peacefully and patriotically speech will be coming out any day now," as yet another attempt to cover up all the bad news about bribes, payoffs, and extortion coming from the Biden camp. This seems to be the way they do it. He calls it election interference and prosecutorial misconduct. So again, that from a Trump Truth Social post. And news that, again, the third Trump indictment could come down any day now, perhaps any hour. With us now, Alan Dershowitz is a professor emeritus of Harvard Law and the author of the book Get Trump. Professor, welcome, and thanks so much for coming on. A lot of topics to cover with you today, but if we could just start of the possibility of a third Trump indictment. When might we see that, based on what the former president has disclosed, and what could we expect?
Oh, it's a certainty that he will be indicted. The question is, will be indicted for a constitutionally protected speech on January 6th, a speech that I think was wrong to give, but not a crime or an impeachable offense or anything of that kind, as the Senate already determined. But we will see an indictment. Now, will the indictment also include the so-called fake electors? Now, the Constitution really provides for a way of challenging elections by having an alternate slate of electors. It happened in Tilden Hayes. It happened in 1960 with Kennedy. It's happened since that time. And so I'm interested in seeing what the indictment exactly alleges. The terrible tragedy in America is we're seeing the weaponization of criminal justice system, of impeachment on both sides, and the American public isn't helped by that. On the impeachment issue, for example, as you know, I argued successfully in front of the Senate that to impeach a president, you have to charge him with treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, meaning criminal type conduct comparable to treason and bribery. And I don't see the Republicans having that kind of evidence at this point. And if some Republicans now vote for impeachment who voted against Trump's impeachment, there will be an allegation of hypocrisy. I think there's a lot of hypocrisy on both sides. Americans should be able to vote in the next election based on the economy and foreign policy, not on who's a worse criminal. And that's the way we're seeing it moving toward an election as to whether or not the Biden, quote, crime family or the Trump family are worse criminals. That's for the justice system to determine. We voters should have the right to vote for who we think is the best candidate.
Yeah, and obviously Republicans argue about House Democrats pushing for, again, bringing impeachment charges over a phone call and a phone call alone to Ukraine. I wanted to get back to, if I can, though, to the possible third indictment of President Trump. Yep. Senator Ted Cruz had this to say recently. Listen to this.
This Department of Justice, this Attorney General, this FBI is the most politicized and weaponized we've ever seen. The Democrats hate democracy. They are deathly afraid the voters will choose to elect Donald Trump. They don't want that to happen, and so they are trying to use the machinery of law enforcement to prosecute him. I think these indictments are a disgrace.
Now, even to piggyback on what Senator Ted Cruz said, a New York Times Siena poll recently showing that both Biden and Trump are even when it comes to a general election, I believe at 44 points here. How do these indictments play out in terms of the voters' minds, Professor, and basically in what you've seen here? Because there could be a fourth indictment coming out of Georgia. These impacts, does that have impact on Trump?
Well, I think my former student, Ted Cruz, had it exactly right when he said that the people should have the right to vote based on the qualification of the candidates, not the criminal justice system. I do think it's always a mistake for the incumbent president's administration to indict the opponent unless the evidence is overwhelmingly clear, unless it satisfies the Nixon standard, which is that bipartisan support for criminalization. And I don't think we see that now. I think what we see is stretches. The New York indictment was a sham. The Georgia indictment, I think the D.C. indictment would not withstand analysis. The only one that has any legs at all is the Florida indictment, and that's basically for possessing classified material, which other candidates have done over the years. The real issue is obstruction of justice, and that involves triple hearsay evidence. And so right now, I don't see the case for convicting or disqualifying Donald Trump. I have the constitutional right to vote against him for the third time. I voted against him twice. You have the constitutional right to vote for him if you choose to. But those rights shouldn't be denied by bureaucrats or prosecutors unless the evidence of crime just jumps out at you and is overwhelming. I just don't see that. I don't see that in any of the cases. In my book, Get Trump, I go through each of the 4 cases, and I predicted that there would be indictments on these cases. By the way, I also predicted that the Hunter Biden plea agreement would not be accepted initially by the judge on that record.
Right.
And so we're seeing a weaponization of the criminal justice system on all sides, and the American public is the real victim of this distortion of our criminal justice system.
The GOP, a few GOP members are launching a probe into that plea deal now based on what has been learned thus far. Professor Dershowitz joining us. We do appreciate your time. Thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thank you.